Hi, I'm Rick Dior, and today we're going to start a three-part series on orchestral cymbals. They're called Piatti. That's the Italian word for orchestral crash cymbals as well as suspended cymbals. So today, the introduction, we're going to talk about the sizes of cymbals, types of straps, and the basics on how to play them. So you heard there a set of light Sabian 18-inch Viennese. These are pretty old. They're from the early 90s, I believe. I bought them used, so I'm not positive. There are several cymbal manufacturers making really good quality cymbals these days. You have Zildjian, Sabian, Piatti, Meinl. Those are the big four. All of their cymbals are really good, and they're all really different. And I have several of those I'll show you in this series, probably about 15 pairs of cymbals. So an orchestral cymbal is different than a regular drum set cymbal. It's heavier, first of all. Some of them would work maybe as a crash cymbal, the lighter ones, but most of these would not work as a crash or a ride. If you try to take your ride cymbal, your 18 or 20 inch, and pair it with another one and make a set of orchestral cymbals, it'll work in a pinch, but it won't be heavy enough and have enough articulation to get you through a professional job. So you really need to buy professional cymbals to play well. That being said, some of the older Ks, the original Ks, will work in this way, and many of those cymbals were made for bands. Originally, the original Turkish cymbals were made for bands during wartime, marching kinds of bands, festival kinds of bands, and this dates back to the 1600s. So those cymbals were very thick, and then cymbals got thinner and thinner as the drum set came onto the scene in the 20th century, and people were using them for ride and crash cymbals. But originally, orchestra cymbals were pretty heavy and pretty thick. That doesn't mean they have to be, but most of them are going to be, so they speak over the music. That being said, these cymbals are a little bit lighter. They're called light orchestral cymbals. And all the manufacturers will give you a choice now with every size they make. They might have like Viennese, Germanic, all kinds of different categories within their lines. And then, of course, they'll have different sizes, anywhere from 16 up to 24 inches. And they're going to have a light version, a medium version, and a heavy version. So when you go shopping for one pair of cymbals, your first pair, what I suggest is an 18-inch set of medium cymbals. And you're going to want to try them out first, or at least know that you can send them back if they're not any good. Many of the cymbal manufacturers these days will make a hand-hammered version. That's what these are. You can obviously tell. Now, if it's hand-hammered or machine-hammered, there's no way to know. You'd have to be there when they made it. But either way, a hammered cymbal is much darker than a non-hammered cymbal, just like drum set. And also, they're less predictable how they're going to sound. So every single cymbal is going to sound different. And now you're dealing with two cymbals. So every two cymbals are going to sound different. So there's no way you're going to get a pair of cymbals that sound exactly the same. So you can order them and try them out, or just make sure you can bring them back, or you can actually maybe schedule some sort of visit to a show, like the NAMM show or the PAS, Progressive Art Society show, something like that, where there's manufacturers there that you can maybe buy something there. That's what I would suggest, and that's how I've bought most of my cymbals in the past. So let's talk about some equipment. Every cymbal that works as Piatti is going to have a strap like this. Now there's several kinds of straps. These are my current favorite, these Zildjians, sort of like the Cadillac of cymbal straps, very comfortable. And since my hands are getting old and arthritic, it's very nice for me to be able to grip something a little softer. Unfortunately, they're very expensive too expensive in my opinion. They have a hole here that you'll see. That's for hanging a suspended cymbal on a hanger, which we will talk about when we do the suspended cymbal part of this video series. Now these straps have 4 separate ties here, and they're going to go inside the cymbal, and then you tie them in a square knot. And I'm going to be doing a close-up in a minute to show you how to do that. But before we do that, I'll show you another type of cymbal holder. This strap is a marble strap. There's a little marble in here, a little ball, and what happens is you fold it over like this. Well, I can show you. It's very simple. You fold it over like that, okay, and you'll put it through the back of the cymbal, and then you just pull it through, and you're done. That's really, really nice. So these straps work well, and I've used them for years on different things. Unfortunately, the problem with these straps is that they wear out rather quickly. As you can probably see, here's a new one, and here's a used one. Here's a very used one. This one's ready to go. What happens is they tear, and this marble will pop out, and then it's really dangerous. Then you're finished. So never, ever, ever use a strap that's like this. You can hurt someone, the cymbal can go flying, it can fall on the floor, which it will, and be very embarrassing. And I've actually seen that happen a few times in my career. It hasn't happened to me, but I've seen it happen to other people. And it's terrifying and funny at the same time. All right, but you don't want to get fired for that. So the straps with the balls like this, the marbles, are good, but keep your eye on them. The next kind we have, there's not a lot of these anymore, but these gamble straps, these are very old, and they had a piece that went in there on the other side. Pull this out here. Other side of the cymbal like that to, I guess, protect it. In my opinion, that's not needed, and it would probably muffle the cymbal. But I did have a pair of cymbals that I bought used that came with these, and I'd never seen that before. So that's something to look out for. If you do get this, you might want to throw it away and not use it, and get some straps that have a little thicker ties here, okay? You can also buy straps just straight leather like this, very thin. These are comfortable, but again, they'll stretch. So not the best choice because they stretch out on you, and then you got to retie them a lot. But these are well broken in. This was on a pair of my cymbals for 25 years, so you see how broken in they are. You also have some thick leather straps like these Piatti. These are good, but the problem with these is they never, ever loosen up. So they're always going to be thick, too tight. So they're very secure. The cymbal will not fall off, but you will get blisters more than usual. You're going to get them no matter what. And then you're going to callus over if you play cymbals. It's just like, if you can see my finger there, it's actually deformed from playing so much cymbals over the years. Got a big callus, all that, all right? Especially if you're playing summer pops and you got to play a lot of marches, you'll get them. So I don't recommend these thick leather straps. So a good strap has a couple things in common. First of all, it should be comfortable, maybe cushioned. Part of it should be leather. Leather is the toughest material that you can use for these. But the ties can be synthetic. Okay, that's fine. They're going to be strong. This stuff is not going to break, maybe ever. And I've been using these Zildjian straps for a couple years now and have not had a problem. The other strap that I'll show you is this Meinl strap. These are nice. They're completely different than anything else. See that? Very secure. And they have this hole so you can put them on the suspended cymbal hanger. But they are a little thick. So if you have small hands, probably not the best thing for you. But they're very secure, and I do like these a lot. I'm planning on buying some more eventually. So that's a Meinl cymbal strap. So as you see, these are all very, very different. So you have a lot of choices. The ones I recommend, though, are the Meinl, the Zildjians, I like these, and these Ludwigs. I like these too, but keep your eye on them because they're they might break. The good thing about these is you can put them on a cymbal really fast. So it's always good to have a few of these around in case you have to hang a cymbal very fast, a suspended cymbal. Now, all Piatti, or most Piatti, should work well as suspended cymbals, which means they should be thin enough to put on that hanger and play. All right? So each cymbal, when you get it, is going to be a little bit different pitch. So that's one. So that's a little lower. And you can experiment on playing each cymbal lower or higher in either hand. And we'll switch them. So hopefully you hear there's a huge difference there. And you can use that to your advantage. You don't always have to play one in the right hand, one in the left hand. You could switch them around, then you have two different sounds. The other thing you might want to do is mark the cymbals where they sound best. So you could put a pencil mark and then line it up with the other one on the inside. And you do that with both cymbals. So if you find a sweet spot, you're in luck, okay? So you can mark that. Also, when you store cymbals, you need to store them flat. Do not store a bunch of cymbals like this and then stick them in a road case. What happens over time is they bend, they warp, and then they're almost impossible to play softly with. So when you play soft, you're playing like this. And if that cymbal is warped, parts of it are going to hit first and maybe even create an air pocket. All right? So that's the basics about the cymbals themselves. And again, in other parts of these videos, I'll be talking about many types of manufacturers, hand-hammered, not hand-hammered, so you'll get a good taste of that. Now, before we go on, like I promised, we're going to pause here for a second, and I'm going to do a close-up and show you how to tie a cymbal knot with one of these straps. So let's learn how to tie a cymbal knot. We'll use this old K, which is a good thing to experiment on. The hole of these cymbals is much smaller than modern cymbals. This one's a little bit keyholed. And this is a cymbal I use as an orchestral Piatti, suspended cymbal. So normally there would be a strap on this to hang on the hanger. So you take your strap. All of them are going to have 4 separate ties, and you layer them on top of each other, like so. And then you're going to go through the top of the cymbal with that, like that. You're going to pull it tight, but not too tight. There'll be time to do that later, okay? If you can see there, that's how much on these Zildjian straps. And most of them will be the same way, where those ties will end at a certain point. You can give yourself about 1/4 of an inch leeway there. Then you turn the cymbal over. I'm going to put something under this. And then you're going to have 4 different straps, as I said, and you're going to lay them out. So there'll be 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay? Going clockwise. So you'll take number 1 and you'll put it over number 2, like that. You're going to put your finger on it. Then number 2 over number 3, put your finger on it. Number 3 over number 4, and then take number 4 and put it through the loop that you created when you put number 1 over number 2. So then we pull it through loose and try to keep them even. So here's where we're at with that. Should look like a square. All right? Then we start tightening. 2 at a time. Keep them even. Little by little. Be patient. Just keep tightening. Finally, check back up top again, and you should have now a little more space, which is what you want. So right there, we might have a 1/2 inch. That's so the strap can move freely. It's very important. So don't pull it so hard that the strap is going to stand up at all times. All right. So finally, I'm going to pull it tight, each one separately. So you put your finger on the knot and you pull, finger on the knot, pull, finger on the knot, pull, and get them tight. And then it'll look like this. And that's exactly what you want. Okay? Now, if those straps are a little too long, those ties, the other cymbal won't hit them because of the shape of the cymbal. But if they are, you can always cut them off and then burn the ends with a match, and that will melt it so it won't fray. That's important. So if you do any cutting on these synthetic ones, which aren't leather, leather won't do that, but these will. They'll unravel. So you see how I burned these edges. They don't come like that, okay? And that's it. We're done. And that'll stay on there forever, all right? Or until something really bad happens. All right, so you're good with that. Now, before every concert, sort of a tradition or superstition, I always check the knots and I pull tight just in case, especially on the big cymbals. That would pretty much ruin your life if one fell off during a big cymbal crash, okay? So you don't want that. Now let's talk a little about cymbal pads. Cymbal pads are these devices that go on top of your strap like this. I do not use these. I think they muffle the sound of the cymbal, and they actually make it harder for me to control the cymbal. Some people use them because playing cymbals inherently hurts. You're putting a lot of pressure on your fingers, your knuckles. You can use them if you want. I do not recommend it. My teacher at the Manhattan School of Music, Fred Hinger, forbade me to use them. And so I never have, and I'm glad I haven't. But there are 2 types if you do want to use them. There's the really thick ones, like these Piatti, that are made of leather. They're expensive, they're well made. All right? They're going to muffle the cymbal even more. And they're actually pretty uncomfortable. They're hard. So they'll take a while to break in, if ever. Now these are brand new. I got these with some Piatti cymbals they sent me, but I never used them. So these, if you have to use them, if you have maybe problems with your hands or in pain, and I understand that, that's okay, then these are the best ones to use. They're felt. They have a little slit here. They fit over any strap, and they're very thin, so they'll muffle the cymbal less than a heavy leather. And they are comfortable. I have to say that. But you'll really have to grab that cymbal tight. And as we'll see in a minute when we start talking about playing techniques, it's going to mess up your grip. So that's my thought on these pads. You can do whatever you want to do, but if it was me, I would not use them, and I'd toughen up my hands trying to learn how to play the cymbals. So this is a cymbal cradle that's holding up these crash cymbals. I'll take these off so you can see a little better. So you see here it has these arms that are coated with rubber tubing that you can slide on or off of there. That will need to be replaced from time to time. It wears out, it dries out. To keep it from drying out, you could put some WD-40 or some sort of oil on there. It'll last a lot longer. This particular one is made by LaFima. I have a few of these. I like it. Comes off like that, and then this part even comes off, which is really nice, and it folds flat like that, so it's easy to transport. Many cymbal cradles don't do that. They're just stuck in place. So this is a really good thing to get if you get your hands on one. So I'll show you a different cymbal cradle. This is also LaFima, and this is a cradle you can put on a stand. So this clamps on to a stand, and then that clamps onto that, even a music stand. And then you could put a smaller pair of cymbals. You don't put anything too heavy or it'll tilt the stand over. But I have used two of these, one on either side, to balance it. So if I have a set of 18s and 17s, and that works really well. So that's a great thing to have if you can get your hands on one. Again, they're in Europe, so you probably have to order it somehow. But that's LaFima, okay? Now I'll show you a cheaper cradle. Let me move some of these cymbals. So I always like to show you guys things that aren't well made, so you have a reference point. And I do this in almost all of my videos. So this is a cheaper cradle. Not sure who makes it, but you see there, it just has these two little arms, very thin metal. It's going to wobble no matter what. It's got these two bumpers, and it's not bad. It's got these locks. It's kind of like a keyboard stand almost. But it's very flimsy, and I could definitely see this thing failing. I'm sure it's cheaper, but one thing you don't want to skimp on when you're talking about playing professionally are cheap stands that could fall over and damage your equipment and also damage the performance. So I don't use this when I go out and play gigs. It basically stays at home, and I will leave a pair of cymbals on there in case I need to practice, but I don't gig with it. So that's an example of a cheaper cymbal cradle, okay? All right. Now let's talk about some techniques. So we're going to use these Sabians once again to demonstrate. They're a lighter weight cymbal, and I'm going to be doing this a lot today, and I want to have a body left when I'm done, so especially when we get to the 20s. So like I said, these are Sabian 18s. They're lights, and these are old ones. They're hand hammered. Generally, like I said, hand hammered cymbals are going to be darker sounding than non-hand hammered cymbals. The darkness of those is definitely desirable for some repertoire. So you don't want super bright cymbals for everything. So I like the way these sound, and they're really good for softer playing. So it's a really nice, dark, warm sound. So let's talk about the grip. So we already did the straps, and the grip is as follows. Take your finger like this, put it under the strap like that, and torque it. In other words, press your thumb against that bell, and you want it to be tight. Your knuckles will rest on the bell. The goal is to have the least amount of skin or body part on that cymbal so it rings the most it can. That's very important. So you don't want to do that where you're grabbing it like a fist, because if you do that, then your whole palm is muffling the bell, and that's where most of the cymbal sound comes from. If you've ever used a flat ride cymbal, you know what I'm talking about. Very dry. So once you muffle that bell, you're losing a lot of your beautiful ring that you want. So put it on your knuckles, or at least the flat part of your hand. And then when I say torque it, I mean hard. It's going to hurt, okay? But eventually you'll build up your strength all in here, and your fingers will develop calluses and it won't be a problem. This might take a while, but you'll live, so don't worry. And then you do the same with the other cymbal, like that, okay? If you have to, you can put it against your body and torque it like that. So this is one of the first things I teach my music tech classes. In other words, I teach, or used to teach more at the university. Now I have too many students, but used to teach all the prospective music education folks who are going to be band directors how to play percussion. And we spend a lot of time on cymbals. And this is the thing they have the most trouble with, is holding the things, getting a grip. Especially some of the people who aren't as strong, they have trouble controlling them. So we'll start with some really light cymbals. I have a set of Meinls you'll see in another video. I call them training cymbals. They're so light, and they sound good, but they're so light that anybody could play with them. So when you're first learning, you might want to use a lighter set of cymbals. Once you're torqued up there, your thumb is going to meet the other fingers like that. So that grip looks like this without the cymbal. It's almost like your fulcrum grip with the drumstick, okay? Good. Not too tight, but you need to get it so you can control it. And then you're going to need to try to turn the cymbal like this without it going crazy like this. And that's harder than it looks, okay? Especially when you're dealing with 20, 24-inch cymbals that might weigh, 10 pounds each. It's going to be tough, so, all right? And then same with the left hand. And then you just want to try to offset them. Don't do anything fancy. Stand up straight, okay? And just basically drop the right hand on the left hand. Once again. So that's the first thing you need to learn how to do, is drop that right hand. So next, we're going to bring up the left hand just a little bit at the end of the crash. Now without the cymbals, that looks like this. Okay? Should be elegant looking. And again, relax your upper body, stand up straight, don't lean to one side. That's common that people do. So once again, get the grip, torque it, right hand, then left hand. You may need to use your body. And then left hand down. Again, this is the way that I play cymbals. Other people might play a little different. All right? And then the right does the dropping. And then after that, bring up the left hand at the last minute. Now, I've seen people play like this, up, in other words, backwards. I don't know how they do it, but I've seen it and they sound fine. So if that's what you do, more power to you. The most important thing is that it sounds good. And if it sounds good, it is good. So it doesn't matter how you look, but you need to be consistent. The worst thing that you could do is start getting air pockets and playing inconsistent cymbal crashes. And believe me, I've heard it my whole career, people right next to me playing terrible cymbal crashes, and it drives me absolutely nuts. So you have to practice a lot. And the key to playing cymbals is being relaxed. Don't overdo it. And you'll want to, because normally cymbals, when you play cymbals, you'll be tense because it's a huge solo. Whenever you play, you're playing a solo when you're playing cymbals. It's not like, a violinist who could just hide there in the section. People hear cymbals, they see them, they know it's you. So you might get a little nervous, you might get a little tense. Fight that and breathe and just relax when you play. Now let's talk about a flam. So this is a little bit of a controversial subject for some people. Back in the old days, we'll say the 1940s and 50s, and I know this from talking to some of my teachers, Walter Rosenberger, Fred Hinger, Buster Bailey, we took a few lessons with. And Walter used to tell me a lot about this because he played with the New York Philharmonic. And, they had such a great percussion section back then. Arnie Lang and Buster and Walter and incredible players. And I learned a lot from just talking to these guys. And of course, Fred Hinger, who was my teacher for 4 years at Manhattan, and he was with the Philadelphia Orchestra for a long time, and then the Metropolitan Orchestra, the opera orchestra, the Met, for a long time. So he's, he worked with Michael Buxbaum and just some of the greatest cymbal players, and he was a great cymbal player as well. So I learned a lot from these guys, but they didn't play the same way. So what I did was I took everything I learned from them and kind of created my own way of playing that I was comfortable with. Because again, you might be shorter, you might, not be as strong, you might be bigger. You have to do your own thing, but you learn as much as you can from everybody and then make it your own. And that's what I did. So what I finally came up with as a way to play very consistent is a motion that I use all the time. And that flam motion is a big part of it. So when I say flam, I mean this. The bottom cymbal will hit right before the top. I played 3 different widenesses there. In other words, open to closed flams. Here's a real closed one. You probably don't even hear it, and I worked a lot on that. If you want to play a really open one, it sounds like this. So that's great for like a cymbal crash in Tchaik 4. The last movement is a huge cymbal crash right before the recapitulation. And it's one of the biggest things in the whole rep for percussion for cymbals. And you just use the biggest cymbals you have, and you just let it go. And that's a spot where you might use a really open flam. Now you're not going to hear da-da, you're just going to hear a big fat cymbal crash. Now if you do play with a flam motion, the good news is that you will never ever get an air pocket. It's literally impossible if you play with a flam motion. If you play like this, you're going to get them a lot. So it's the offsetting of the cymbals that creates that flam. So you see my top one is a little lower, just a little. We're talking ½ inch or less than the one in my left hand. So the one in my right hand is a little lower. And then when I wind up and play, what's happening, the bottom of the cymbal is hitting like that. But at the same time, my hands are doing this, like that, like a little explosion. Not this, okay, this. So it's all about the motion. It's just like playing, snare drum. If you get the right motions, if you learn your rudiments, then you'll be able to play repeated crashes exactly the same. All right? So that's what we're talking about here, consistency. Now, when you're playing soft, that's completely different. So what you want to do is put the cymbals against your body to start with, and then open them up just a little. So soft cymbal crashes are one of the hardest things to do. I've been privileged enough to be on several audition committees where we auditioned other, principal percussion or timpani and things like that. And learning, sitting on those committees, you learn so much by listening to player after player. And all these players are really good because we've noodled or wheedled them down from 250 people to maybe 60 people, and that's who gets invited. And so you hear a lot of different cymbal playing, you hear a lot of different whatever, percussion playing, timpani playing. So one thing you learn is cymbal sound and certain things, certain quirks people have that they don't do well. Well, soft cymbal playing is a big one of those, which will win or lose you in audition. And one of the common excerpts is Rachmaninoff Piano Concerto No. 2, where you're playing a solo with the pianist, very soft. He's playing triplets and you're going. Something like that, right? And it's just you, and the pianist who is probably, 50, 60 feet in front of you, in front of the stage, in front of the orchestra with the conductor, and you're having to listen to that and play a little ahead of the beat because you'll be behind back there. And conductors are fiercely critical about these kinds of things. So it's always on audition lists. So I came up with a little thing that helps me play soft. And I've had to play that thing several times. And I really enjoy it. I love the piece. And it's fun. I mean, at this point, you know, I'm not worried about it anymore because I'm old. But I used to get really nervous. And when you're nervous, you're going to shake like that. So one thing I do is use really light cymbals. So I'll use a set of cymbals like these Minors. Okay, these are even lighter than those Sabians. These are the practice cymbals I was talking about. And again, I'll do a tenting motion where I put them against my body. And then right before I play, I'll tent them out like this and then bring them out so they're exactly the same. So I used to practice in front of a mirror so I could see if I was doing that. But the trick is, it's always the first crash that gets you because you don't know if you're lined up until you play one. And remember, you're sitting there for a while before you got to get up and play. So you just do that. Okay? So that's something you just have to practice for hours and hours and hours. Now, you might want to consider building up your upper body strength. I used to just lift weights for my upper body and my shoulders for this, nothing else. I'm not really a sports person or anything like that. But I would lift a lot of weights just so I was strong enough when I had to play cymbals that I could be consistent and not shake. So that's the way you want to play softly. There's other kinds of soft cymbal crashes or just slides like this. Okay, sometimes in Dvorak, this is Dvorak Symphony, you can use that in New World, I think it is. Everything's running together at this point. But that's one thing you can do. If the conductor thinks you're too loud, just try that, and they might give you the thumbs up, all right? So let's talk about one more thing before we take a pause. You can warm up cymbals if you're playing with heavy cymbals. It's like warming up a gong. So if you're playing with like 20s and they're thick and you got a big crash coming up, we warm them up on your legs like that and get them in motion. And then if you're playing softly, obviously you're not going to warm up the cymbals. But when you're playing loud, that's a good thing to do. Again, so they're in motion. See that? And then they're already going. Good. So we'll take a little break here, and we'll talk about a few more things, and then we'll move on to the next video. Now let's talk about some short choked crashes. So when we do that, we're going to drive the cymbals into the stomach, not the chest, the stomach. So like this. And once again, it's important to relax your shoulders when you do that. You don't want to be tight. If you're tight, it's not going to sound good. So I would suggest practicing maybe 20 of these in a row, exactly the same. And just a note that normally you're going to play chokes loudly from mezzo forte to fortissimo. Normally they're not done too soft. That's more rare, okay? So practice them about mezzo forte. And try to get every single one of them the same volume. That's very important. The same sound, the same volume. And then practice them a little louder. Now you're going to go for more impact there. There's a famous excerpt by Tchaikovsky, Romeo and Juliet, where you're doing those in quick succession. So stuff like that is difficult to do if you're tight. You need to be in control of the cymbals, but not, freaking out with it, okay? Well, let me move these out of the way so you can see a little more clear. We'll talk about a few more things. So when you play that choke, all right, and you drive it into your stomach, you need to make sure that you have a couple of, let's say, length formulas. Sometimes when you do a choke, you don't want it to be choked right away. So you want it to last a little longer, like this. So length of notes is a big thing if you play cymbals. Obviously, it's a percussion instrument that rings, just like the triangle. All right, snare drum doesn't ring. Bass drum will ring as well. But several, xylophone's not going to ring on you, but a glockenspiel will. So some instruments ring, some instruments don't. And you need to know about length of notes. But the problem is the notation isn't clear. So you either learn by tradition or use your ears. So you need to be able to have several lengths of notes to play musically with the rest of the orchestra. So anything from a staccato or marcato short note that's really short to a very long kind of tenuto note. And again, you use your stomach, okay? Doesn't matter how skinny or fat you are, you're going to have something there to muffle those cymbals. Also, if you're wearing a tux with tails, one thing that can be a problem is the buttons. All right, so just be wary of that and aware of that, and then you can muffle in around that. So you'd go inside of those buttons. Also, it can be slippery. So maybe practice with your tux jacket or your tux on. I used to do that. I know that's weird, but that's how I practice because I knew I'd be performing like that. All right, so if we want to do a really long note, this would sound like this. As opposed to just letting it ring. So short note, a little longer, and long. So that's how you muffle. Good. Now, let's talk about a cymbal roll. So I'm not talking about doing this with mallets. I'm talking about rolling around the cymbals. So like this. Some composers write that. They want that effect. You can also do and leave it on there. Okay? So in other words, you make that crash longer by doing this. So it actually lasts a little bit longer. So those are just some effects you can do. Now there's some really good books on all this. I think it was Frank Epstein who wrote a book called Cymbalisms. I might be wrong. I'm sorry if I am. Or just something about cymbals that was really interesting. He has all these names for things, the spiz, the splang, the sploon, whatever. It's funny and it's cute. And that's totally worth checking out. He's probably got some videos on YouTube. He played with the Boston Symphony Orchestra. He's now retired, but he played all the cymbals, I think, with them. So he's got a wealth of knowledge and a great career. So he would definitely be someone to check out, and that book would be as well.